Good afternoon. This is Corey S. with the Bull City Bulletin, and I'm joined with Eric B. on July 27th, 2014. We are going to be talking about a wide range of topics as usual, but we would like to focus today's broadcast a little bit more focus on the medical industry and all of the problems and new developments that are taking place. Eric has recently had some health issues, which has probably given him some firsthand experience into what's changing and what's actually going wrong currently in our system. Of course, it's not a recent development. We have to look back in history to understand how we got where we are today. And there's a lot that could be said. So this isn't going to be a very long broadcast, but hopefully we can just scratch the surface, like Eric always says. And if we can do that, then we've actually done a pretty good job, because this is a very vast topic, especially when you talk about such a wide spectrum of issues, and not just on one particular problem. We have to kind of extrapolate and try to have a holistic understanding of the system and what makes it the way that it is today. And so, Eric, maybe you want to get a little more specific and talk about some of the issues, not only that you've experienced personally, but in your professional life, since you are in the health industry, that kind of epitomize the real trouble that we're in.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, to find out the real trouble we're in, it's almost we can go two ways about it. The first way is just observe how things are right now, how our we're going to talk about our medical system, how our medical system is right now. We can go from that point, or we can try to go back into the past and explain how the social engineers have created the reality we're in right now. So I think it's good to fluctuate between both points, but I'm going to start off how our system is right now. I just got diagnosed with diabetes last week, and it came out of nowhere, and I wasn't even aware of it. It's almost in the same realm. I'm a cancer survivor too. It was interesting with me with the cancer, when I first got cancer, that we don't get CT scanned each year like with your physical annual, or maybe because there's radiation effects once every 2 years, to see if there is cancer in your body. Because in essence, you can't diagnose cancer because it's so well hidden. It basically fools the body to draw energy into the body and just grows and kind of assimilates with the body. So I had kidney cancer and I got a kidney removed, but my symptoms were back pain, high blood pressure, fatigue, different things that if I went to any medical professionals, they would want to put me on high blood pressure medication. Boy, if I went to a psychologist, probably diagnose me with some type of depression, want to put me on some type of antipsychotic, and so forth. But what I'm trying to get everyone to observe right in front of us, hiding in plain sight, is that the medical industry doesn't even truly treat cancer. Because if it did, everyone would be getting CT scans each year. And on that note, I would just, as a solution and as information, as a warning for people out there listening with families and so forth, you've got to advocate whatever you can. You've got to say whatever you can to get a CT scan. And coincidentally, insurance companies are involved with the approving procedure. Okay, so that with the cancer, the same thing with the diabetes. The kidney cancer came out of nowhere. I went through the whole process of surgical. I mean, every doctor in the book. no one talked to me about diabetes and how I should be watching my blood sugar level. So last week, I'm dizzy, my eyes are foggy, incredible fatigue. I go to the doctor. Oh my God, your blood sugar level is in the 600s. I gotta send you to the emergency room. So those are just two obvious things. I don't even have the CDC statistics on how many people have cancer. I've heard 1 in 4 have cancer. I have a CDC statistic for diabetes right now. Let me get that on the share.
And while you're doing that, let me just comment on
Sure.
how I see things. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose anybody, but I've been around long enough to witness some things in the medical industry and how the insurance companies get involved and really manipulate basically the medical industry to kind of extract as much money as possible out of the individual, while at the same time kind of engendering a sort of dependency on insurance. Insurance is supposed to, you're basically paying them money to render a service in the unlikely event that something catastrophic happens to you. But since we've equated medical insurance with health care, people have to get insurance just to pay for the most basic of treatments. And so in addition to that, you have this this complex. I mean, it really is a medical industrial complex. It is an industry, like we said. So what do industries do? They're in their DNA is the goal of making increasing amounts of money. And one of the primary vehicles to do that is the rigged insurance business. Okay. On top of that, when you have this profit motive, and I'm not saying that doctors shouldn't make a profit, or that hospitals shouldn't make a profit. Profit will lead to better treatment, better discoveries, better resources to treat these things. But it seems to be, just kind of a delusion that we tell ourselves. We get told by the medical industrial complex that cancer is almost like an inevitability, like you're genetically predisposed. That whole line. Were we just created to get cancer? Does anybody actually believe that there's purely a genetic link to getting cancer? No, there's environmental factors, lots of them, and you don't hear many doctors really talking about that or advocating, removing yourself or protecting yourself from these toxins to actually prevent the cancer. It's more of a reactive approach. We wait till we have cancer, and then we have all sorts of different, in my opinion, brutal and really devastating treatments. But these treatments aren't exactly cures. It's more about easing the pain, extending life a little bit longer, rather than actually getting to the source and the root cause of a lot of these ailments. And these things, they'll say, oh well, we just didn't have the technology to diagnose these things 50 years ago, so people were dying of cancer without having the diagnosis. That may be the case, but there were tons of toxic environmental factors even back then. So why don't we go over to your screen share? Why don't you tell us about what you've got up here?
Sure. Here's the diabetes statistic report from CDC. You brought up some good points. Listen, if a political figure is not talking about cleaning our food, cleaning our air, and cleaning our water, if those things aren't taken care of, what can you talk about? So here, this goes back to trying to show people how the system is basically built to cause disease. That's why we have all these GMOs, these preservatives, these oil-based, all these petroleum-based ingredients in our food. Our water is fluoridated. It's got runoff with psychotropics, chemical industry, fracking, and our air is just polluted with carcinogens, depleted uranium, and not to mention all the chemtrailing going on. So this is to cause all these diseases. Now, when our licensed medical people, who were basically formed and supported by the Rockefeller groups in the earliest 20th century, they're the ones that started all the licensing with the MDs, the psychologists, and etc. When they come to these diseases, they're not thinking that they're in a social engineering scam. So when they see these diseases, they're totally blind to it and are just taking the superficial information that's coming to them. They're not daring to get to the causal part. Okay, so let's say, okay, the conspiracy that we're being engineered in a Skinner box is too far-fetched. You would at least think that these medical professionals would look at how chemical industry is destroying our biology and our planet. But
Right.
they don't. They don't even politically advocate that. And you know why? Because they think that's the way it is. And
Well, it's
that's
not only the way it is, but they're getting kickbacks. They're getting, fringe benefits for allowing this to take place. I have an example here. I saw this earlier this week. It was a 76-year-old veteran was in Greenville, Tennessee, at a board meeting, and apparently the mayor and the council were having a meeting that was supposed to be public, but they did not use microphones, and they had their backs, half of the folks had their backs turned to the audience. But what they were discussing was allowing a private company to essentially drain their wastewater into one of the rivers that ran through this county. And one of the veterans simply asked them to speak up because they were speaking in really low voices at this table, and they ordered him to be removed, and he literally was. I mean, he was escorted out of the facility by these police officers. And people think that we live in a free country, with free speech, and you get to have your say in your local government. And this is just no, not anymore. I mean, I've been to city council meetings in this area. I mean, it's here. It's actually here. And we always talk about the bureaucracy and the onion that gets created by having all this extraneous city staff and the ability to create ad hoc committees and closed hearings. And they use this technique called the Delphi method to kind of manufacture consent about the policies that truly they simply have taken it upon themselves to enact. They consider themselves to be the most qualified, since obviously they were elected by the people. They assume they represent them. Can just basically use majority rule, and this has disastrous effects on our health and our future, because you have the lack of control of our environmental rights. And a lot of people think libertarians and conservatives and quote unquote patriots are not environmentalists, and that's just simply not true. I mean, we have a right to a clean environment. If a private company or an individual is polluting your water, I mean that is our water collectively. And so there has to be recourse, but we don't have any, and that's what I'm trying to communicate. We don't have freedom of speech. They will remove you from the meetings if you speak out of turn. And just like we saw with Duke Energy and the coal ash spill, they spilled one of the largest amounts of toxic chemicals into the the river here in North Carolina, and Duke Energy barely agreed to clean it up. And when they did, they were going to do it with taxpayer money. And now recently they said, we're done. Even though there's still coal ash polluting the bottom of the river all the way downstream, they say, oh, it's just too expensive to clean up. It'll actually be more damaging if we go to clean that up. So we just see this pattern repeated over and over. Simultaneously, when we're losing the benefits of our Western medical system, for all its problems, it does have a lot of benefits, but those are being basically priced out for most people.
Yeah, these our leaders, our authority leaders, how can I put this? Since they can't see the con, they provide their systems to us and think this is the way it is. It's almost a sense too big to fail. I mean, just look at my latest screen share. This is from the American Cancer Society. Estimated number of survivors for the 10 most prevalent cancer sites among males. And if you just look at these numbers, I mean, we're talking millions and millions of people. I mean, this looks like a complete assault on our biology, every organ, every brain. So this is not by accident. This is actually an intended culling agenda. So these medical bodies are now so entrenched, are so accustomed to be legitimate organizations and been going on since the early 20th century that they won't look at the cause and continue to push their superficial medical treatment. And to stop them from seeing the cause, this could be unconscious. From a social engineering perspective, it's definitely engineered, is the bureaucracy. And one of the main bureaucracies right now is the insurance company. And this is, on my screen share, is the Medicare fraud right now that the insurance companies are complaining about. And in 2010, they basically estimated there was $528 billion in fraud. Now, it was our very leaders and insurance companies that set up the system in the first place. And now,
right, and I at one point in my life, I was a durable medical equipment rep, and I was selling medical equipment to patients who were being discharged from the hospital. So I did come to learn a little bit about the insurance business and how things get reimbursed. And we sold a lot of things like walkers, canes, crutches, things that helped people, be more comfortable. And some items were paid for through Medicare, others were not, and the allowables differed, wildly. There really was no rhyme or reason to it, and I understood pretty easily why the Medicare system is completely broke, and that was for the simple reason that our company could bill Medicare, for example, $365 for what was a $15 or $20 cushion that we bought from China. So it was not only as if nobody was looking at the allowables that they were producing, but it seemed like they were purposely inflated to bankrupt the system.
absolutely.
And that's actually what we have. It is a full frontal, multifaceted assault, not just on our health, but on our financial well-being. And that's really what I think the agenda of the Affordable Care Act and all of the recent, especially in the last 20 years, medical regulations and legislation that have come out, it's to hand over increasing amounts of control to the insurance companies, very much like we have bailed out the banks, to the point
Right.
where they're so huge now, they're just like massive vacuums, sucking up all the money. And then for the vendors, who are billing these companies, you can't really blame them for billing, Medicare, for example, $365. The money's out there. It's out there to be had. It's the system that actually puts it out there that really causes the problem. But we also have to keep in mind, like you said, it was intentionally designed this way, and I keep going back to this, but we have to remember they have a Eugenics board, North Carolina, in 1933. Ironically, that's the same year that this country went bankrupt, some decades after the Federal Reserve was created. But the Eugenics board was, kind of an open plan to sterilize people, and it comes from a philosophy of exterminism. It's really an anti-human program, and that's, in my opinion, that's why we see the system as it is. It's not about health. It's not about curing people's diseases. It's about disease control. Controlling disease and the spread of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so superficial. It's just amazing, and we're just trying to get everyone to look below this superficial perception that they're trying to help us. Here's on my screen share, it's basically how many people are actually without health insurance. And the number, this is from September 13th, 2011. This is CNN, which is not a great source of information, which is a whole nother segment, what is real information. And that's why I always get back to let's just observe reality as it is and go out into your community, go out and experience the actual systems, and you'll see for yourself what's really going on, and more importantly, how the psychological makeup is, which I want to get into in just a sec. But this is from 2011. The number of people who lacked health insurance last year climbed to 50 million. And this is in 2009. So it's got to be way more. They're not properly diagnosing for cancer. They're not properly diagnosing for diabetes. We have these psychopaths engineering us and are using biochemistry to create disease and who knows what else with their minds and so forth, using biochemistry. Obviously, the intensity of the scalar attack through TV and this media mainstream and culture is just atrocious. But my experience when I went to the emergency room last week, and just actually going into the medical community and getting treated, it was horrendous. The whole system is horrendous. The emergency room is completely packed with people. The front desk, which represents the hospital, is the person has no answers. Nobody wants to work the front desk. So the only people who can work the front desk are people who are good at not giving answers or giving information. And then when I had to advocate myself because so much time had passed to actually get admitted. And then when I got admitted, I was actually dealing with a nurse who was verbally telling me how much she hated her job and how poorly organized this place is,
Wow.
how lack of information she's getting. So, and then, she would come in, the insurance guy would come in and collect data. He's very efficient. The emergency room doctor would come in and superficially talk. But the psychological makeup of the whole experience, and most of my experience going with doctors and any type of organization, whether it be legal, the police state, everyone is overwhelmed and trampling very fast. Everything's moving very fast. So you can't actually sit down and think and treat.
Right.
Everything's moving so fast. Why is everything moving so fast? Because there's no money, because insurance is basically sucked out all the money. They're over-regulated, so they're really not present. They're just basically thinking the correct data to extract,
Right.
What their rules and regulations are going, and also they're dealing with the overwhelming disease of people, of hundreds and thousands of people flooding the emergency room. So this is this is the actual reality that we're in, and the psychological makeup. So you can't actually get into a causal discussion or a causal dialogue on
Right.
what's really going on. Everything's moving very fast, and you find that in every system. Now, this is designed. It's a combination of.
It's formulaic.
Yeah, it's designed, and it's also organic. So anybody who doesn't believe in this social engineering and actually trusts the government, trusts the system, when they're treating people, they don't feel like they need to get to the cause because they believe the systems, they trust the systems that's doing that. Their empathy is being reduced because everyone's basically being turned into like some type of mechanical.
It's the robotization of the human population, yeah.
So the and so let's just take the medical professional trying to treat somebody, usually good people, smart. They're overwhelmed by the influx of people needing to be treated. They're getting low wages. They're overwhelmed by the regulations because of the insurance companies and the government, wanting to make sure you're getting a job. I mean, it is the worst medical system I've ever seen. This is absolutely terrible. Now here, I have memory. I'm in my 40s, and I can remember my parents and I can remember my grandparents. I was treated by one doctor when I was young, and that one doctor treated my dad. And that one doctor treated my grandfather.
Right.
It was ma and pa systems that were able to regulate how many people they needed to treat because they actually need to do the treatment. So it was more specific. It was more individual. The current system has obliterated that type of ma and pa individual system in the healthcare, in every facet of our civic industry.
Yeah, I just want to make one point about that, and then in the broadcast, when I worked durable medical equipment, just to kind of corroborate what you're saying, just before I left that industry, there was some regulations passed which created a process called competitive bidding, and basically instead of having several ma and pa stores serving, the major hospitals in the area, who would really bend over backwards and give away equipment, do more personal service, going out calls to the house to deliver equipment, because they wanted that business. They wanted to have that trust between the customer, the patient, and the actual store. So these laws created something called competitive bidding, and essentially to get the reimbursement from Medicare, they essentially had a smaller number of vendors who were approved to service a particular hospital. And the idea was, we're going to have a free market alternative to the way it is currently by allowing these companies to competitively bid on the business. But of course, a bigger regional or even national brand is going to have the upper hand against a ma and pa in a local market because they just have more resources. They're able to give away more equipment on a more frequent basis, and so they then from that point forward, the number of vendors who could, you could choose from if you were, say, a Medicare beneficiary or an Aetna beneficiary, immediately shrank. And what happened after, I left that particular business, that the company I was working for sold to a more regional DME provider. So, it's in the medical industry, in the financial industry, in government, in the public school system. It's all this, this march towards centralization and more standardization, less room for creativity in devising solutions or treatments, and more formulaic, kind of like standardized testing and forms to kind of guide your decision-making process, just like the treatment centers that they're now putting in Walmart, where you walk in, you give them your identification, they take some crazy BMI measurement or a picture of you, and then come up with some diagnosis. It really is the we're making medical care algorithmic, based on not just the person who's in front of you, but how much that person is worth treating. So hopefully we've scratched the surface on this incredibly vast and incredibly significant topic. There are many more facets to it. We could talk about pharmaceutical drugs. We can talk about just the psychological diagnoses, which are taking away people's rights. So maybe we'll save that for another broadcast, but we're going to have to end this one short today. Appreciate you guys listening. For more updates, visit bullcitybulletin.com. Eric, do you have any closing comments?
Well, as you were talking about, everything's being centralized, so the medical industry is going to interface with the surveillance industry. Everything is going to homogenize under the surveillance community. They're going to basically run everything, the Gestapo. So good luck, people. Do your research.
It's time to wake up.